Freeman Boat Works and Trilogy Outdoors are proud to announce the addition of Freeman Boat Works to our family of incredible partners. Billy Freeman and his team at Freeman Boat Works epitomize the American dream. From building the first boat in Billy's backyard to a 150,000 square foot state-of-the-art manufacturing plant over the past 15 years, they are building one of the most sought-after boats in the U.S. and beyond. These incredible fishing platforms are built in South Carolina and are second to none in stability, speed, and performance overall. These catamaran designs are engineered not only to get you to the fish fast, but comfortably too. Years of refining designs and pioneering the modern performance fishing catamaran is why Freeman Boat Works is the #1 choice for some of the biggest names in the fishing industry. If it's long runs in the Gulf or the Carolinas, or days you can go fishing in South Florida when most center consoles stay at the dock, Freeman Boat Works is at the forefront in all categories. For more information on Freeman Boat Works and their 6 available models, visit www.freemanboatworks.com. Redefine your expectations. Michelob Ultra and Myrtle Beach wholesaler Southern Crown Partners Incorporated know our consumers enjoy relaxing days on the water with Mick Ultra's crisp and refreshing taste in hand. It's important to remember to drink and boat responsibly. Choose to be or to designate a sober skipper before leaving the dock. Do it for your family and friends, your passengers, and everyone else on board. Michelob Ultra salutes all sober skippers who take the pledge. Cheers, and we'll see you on the water.
In Myrtle Beach, you always go at your own pace. Lie out on the sand, lie out by the pool, go boogie boarding, go surfing, walk the boardwalk, walk the marsh walk, golf at one of 90 golf courses, mini golf at one of 50 mini golf courses, fish off a pier, fish from a chartered boat, go shopping, get drinks, eat the freshest seafood. The list is exhaustive, but the experience isn't. You can go all out or do nothing at all. How you relax is up to you. There is so much to do and explore, whether you're traveling with friends, family, or just yourself. With 60 miles of beach, you're going to find your place. If this sounds like what you need, then this is where you belong.
Trilogy Outdoors.
All right, folks. It's Trilogy Outdoors podcast time, and the Senator and I are together once again. It's been a couple weeks. I know we had to do one. I think I did one last week. You called in. Mm-hmm. You called in. We talked, and we talked some turkey hunting. What else did we talk about? Help me out. Enlighten me. My mind is fried right now.
I don't know. It's been a crazy week, 2 weeks for me, too.
Yeah, you've had some crazy weeks. There's a lot going on here. You know, for anybody that doesn't know, obviously he's a senator. And lots of things going on in the State House. And we're, 3 weeks away from being done?
3 weeks away.
3 weeks away from being done. So they're trying to get things finished up for the season, and
it gets crazier every week that you get closer to the end.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get something done.
And wow, there we go. There's some rain. You can tell, we are not at the Senator's house. We are at the Pond Road Storage Studio, which this doesn't show up, by the way.
No.
And you've lined up a good guest today, and I know there's a lot of hot topics we want to talk about in the fisheries department and other things, and I think this guest is a perfect one for us today. And I'll let you give him his introduction because I know you'll do a way better job than me.
All right, well, Gettys has been around a while and sort of in and out of the Columbia scene, I guess is the best way to put that. Was in the professional bass fishing scene for a while. But
yes, he was.
Picked up a sweet gig as the CEO of the South Carolina Boating and Fishing Alliance and has been advocating for boating and fishing issues for, I don't know, how long has it been now, Gettys? 3 years?
It's been 3.5, almost 4 years. It's when you're having fun, time flies.
Yeah, and doing a great job at it. We appreciate your advocacy. We had a real gap there in, in, I guess advocacy is the right way to put it, in that boating and fishing arena. And so glad y'all came on the show and happy to have you. Welcome to our show, Trilogy Outdoors. We're obviously sort of in the same arena and care about a lot of the same things. And one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on is to talk about some of the recent events that have been transpiring at the federal level. Gettys, as you know, I'm sort of a states' rights guy. And
Oh yeah.
and it's easy to be nowadays when the federal government is so damn screwed up. I mean, it is just so screwed up. And
It is.
yeah, and so
It is.
so from a states' rights perspective, it's very concerning to me, and I know to you when I start hearing things like we're going to have a speed limit on fishing vessels, all vessels, but for our purposes, fishing vessels, offshore. 6, 7 months out. Is it 6 or 7 months? I can't remember English.
I thought it was 6, wasn't it?
Anyway, half of the year we're gonna have a 11
The
mile
good
an hour.
time of year too. It's
Yeah.
like November to the end of April, at least. And then here's the tricky part, Senator. They put these things called dynamic speed zones in place, where if you're outside of that time period and somebody blows the whistle and says that they have seen one of these wells that reminds you only 2 have been hit off the South Carolina coast in the past 52 years. But if they so happen to see one, they can put up a temporary zone. So the months that we're talking about, even then, I think they could figure out a way to extend it if that's truly what they wanted to do.
Well, some environmentalist takes his skiff out to the jetties. Out to the jetties. Let's say May 1st.
Yep.
And says, "Oh, there's a right whale." Quote unquote right whale could be a dolphin, could be a manatee, could be a kingfish, could be a barracuda, could be nothing. Could be a figment of that person's imagination, but there's a right whale, and the possibility now is another speed limit that we were not anticipating. And so, and clearly, I won't say clearly, that maybe that's a little tough on our environmental friends, but they have a vested interest in shutting us down. And I've been fighting this fight, English, for a long
time.
long time. But now they've got control under the current administration, and they're using it to the full extent of their abilities. And so it concerns me. And what I wanted to hear from you a little bit about, Gettys, what do you believe the economic impact of that's going to be for South Carolina? Because you represent a bunch of boating manufacturers, and that's got to be. What's that going to do when all of a sudden people start talking about, well, I can't buy a 36-foot boat anymore, or a 42-foot boat, or a 47-foot boat?
In South Carolina, we had 28 boat manufacturers, soon to be more, I believe. And it's about a $6.5 billion impact on our state's economy each year. And especially when you get into the larger boats. And I think that this is even a fight greater than just the larger vessels, that this rule has an impact on directly, because, as you know, if we give an inch, they're going to take a mile. And so they're going to see that there's not enough boats in this particular class range, or they're going to say there's not enough in this particular class range to make a big difference in the killing of the whales. And here's the thing: no one in our industry wants to hurt a whale. We're all conservationists. We're the original conservationists, and hitting a whale does nothing good for us. It does nothing good for the whale, obviously. Yep. It totals the boats. And, we hear these environmental attorneys and these environmental groups saying that the only 2 causes of death to the right whale are vessel strikes and fishing entanglements. So does that mean there's no natural mortality of these things?
So they don't die from old age?
Yeah, at some
they
point.
Don't die from old. Yeah, that's right. And so we're hearing things like this, and not only is the economic impact crippling, we're also looking at a big safety impact, Senator. And here's the deal with the safety side of things: none of these boats are made to go 10 knots. When you're not planed out, you're swamping people. You're causing a lot bigger wake. You're the front end of the vessel's up higher, your line of sight's messed up. But these folks do not care about what the actual science shows. And I wanted to bring your attention to, and this has nothing to do with South Carolina, but it does with the federal, just the gross overreach we're seeing here. So this past week, Frank Pallone, who's a congressman out of New Jersey, sent a letter with Jerry Nadler and some of the others, all Democrats, sent a letter to the Department of Commerce, Transportation, and Homeland Security, urging them to enforce the vessel's speed restrictions following the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. So, without getting into every detail of this letter, y'all, this is a group of 13 members of Congress that are saying, "Hey guys, we know that there was just a national disaster. We know that there are going to be ways that other boats have to get around that bridge, but mind you, let's not worry about the country's economy, the country's lifeblood that comes through the Chesapeake Bay area there. Let's worry about the whales more." And so you're seeing asinine things like this that continue to happen. And so it says here, and I'll read a direct quote. It says, "In your management of the Baltimore Key Bridge collapse emergency and other efforts to reroute shipping to East Coast ports, we write to request that your department ensures increased maritime traffic is compliant with the vessel speed rules during whale migration season, strict compliance with NOAA and the North Atlantic right whale vessel speed restriction rule for vessels 65 feet and over that will support the administration's commitment to the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act." You can't make this stuff up. They are putting the value of a whale over, in some ways, national security, in some ways, economic security, and so this is insane.
I want to go back to something you said a minute ago. So, you're right. I mean, there is nobody that I know that wants to kill a whale or see a whale killed, by unnatural sources. Let's put it that way. I don't mind if a whale dies by natural sources. I mean, that's part of life. But I don't want to see one get his head beat open by a prop. I mean, that doesn't. So, if this whale is so important, and obviously it is, because I mean we've got members of Congress, as you said, right now that are lobbying to harm our economy, knowingly harm our economy for the benefit of the whale. Okay, if it's so important, why don't we just satellite tag the whales and know where they are at all times and avoid them? I mean, there's only a few hundred of them, right?
That's right.
I mean,
and that's been a huge conversation. Why are we going to the measures that the bureaucratic overlords want to take us to without examining the technological advancements that have happened in our industry over the last 10 or 15 years that does allow for permitting or for tagging, I should say, that does allow for infrared cameras and that sort of stuff. So the technology is there.
Don't you think as important as these whales are to these people, that they probably already know where the majority of them are at any given time? I would think that they do. At least, a general vicinity. I would think that the scientists that follow these things and watch these things 24/7, 365 days a year know where a big chunk of these whales are at any given time. And, yeah, go ahead.
We can follow great white sharks, which there are plenty more than the right whale, and they act like it's just this feat to not be able to find and be able to track the right whales the same way that they do other marine species and other marine mammals. And to me, Senator, that tells us, is the real reason for all of this that we're doing, is it just for the right whale, or is there a clean energy background here? Is there something else that's being pushed for this administration? I mean, when they first submitted the public comments from the administration, it said as a part of the Biden-Harris administration clean energy initiative, less fossil fuels, that sort of thing. What is the reason for this? Because as we're finding out, it doesn't make sense.
So if I proposed, if I had the horsepower, the oomph to walk into the White House right now and walk up to the Oval Office and say, "Mr. President, I'm proposing to switch every combustible engine on a boat with battery-powered engines, just pretend with me for a moment that we can figure that technology out and that, it's going to be, it's good, like it's good to go. Okay. So we're going to swap every outboard engine, current outboard engine with a clean, renewable energy source of some kind. Okay. And an energy source, an outboard motor that runs off battery powers. Forget where the battery power comes from. Let's just say it comes from wind or solar. Okay. So completely clean, as clean as we can possibly get. Does the administration say, oh, okay, all right, well, no speed limit at that point in time. Feel free to run over all the whales you want? I mean, is that what they ultimately want?
So let's expand on that for a second. So
Okay.
if you look into, and man, we got to go here though. Okay, so if you look at the wind energy side of things right now, the wind folks will say, oh, well, we don't kill whales. Okay, we don't kill whales. However,
yeah, a lot of sonar,
process,
a lot of sonar problems right now. But go ahead.
Yes, there are a lot of sonar problems, but in their permitting process, they have an allowed amount of killed whales.
Sure.
So if you're not so yes, the answer to that is yes. This is a clean energy push, and I think it is.
It's not about the
something that
whales at all. Not about the whales at all.
I am the more we learn about the technology that exists to actually protect the whales, and in which we want to do, because if we deploy the technology that we know we can, it would protect the whales. And the lack of interest in that from those in the administration, I absolutely think that this has to do with a clean energy push as opposed to just being strictly for the well.
So real fast before we dive further into that, somebody in their head right now is saying, well, yeah, I know this guy, Gettys, is like, he's with the South Carolina Boating and Fishing Alliance, but what makes him an expert on this? Like, what have you gotten involved in lately that gives you any of this inside information?
So I've spent a lot of time over the last year and a half or so with decision makers around this particular issue, and we've done tons of research for the Boating and Fishing Alliance. We have hired attorneys out of DC, Endangered Species Act attorneys, to look into this and see what the true root cause is for the rule. And met with President Trump in September about this and snapper issues, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yes, we will.
This is something that, even though I come from the freshwater side of things, and, fishing and boating at the end of the day are fishing and boating. And, after 3.5 years of working in our industry, but then also just spending my whole life on a boat, it gives you a lot of common sense knowledge that the scientists that sit behind computers all day don't have. And I've always heard the saying that applied knowledge is greater than academic knowledge. And I think in this case, we've got a bunch of bureaucrats that are sitting behind their desk trying to literally watch how fast you're going on AIS systems, which I know that is a huge privacy overreach. They're sending out 15,000. And then I have the copy of the ticket from a fellow that got one last year in Charleston on a boat over 65 feet from 2 years prior. So the Coast Guard or whoever the enforcement agency is that NOAA is using at the time will send out a $15,000 ticket just by following your trail on your AIS or your GPS system. So you talk about other safety issues. People are going to turn that off on their boat. They're not going to, folks are going to be out there in boats over 35 feet and, turn off their AIS because that's the way it's going to be enforced. There's not going to be somebody out there with a gun, the speed gun, watching you or trying to catch you going fast. This is
a GPS system that is designed to track you wherever you go, how fast you go, and where you're going. Right,
yeah,
and you got to pay for it. Let's just make sure that we all understand what the proposal is. You, the fisherman, the boat owner, has to pay for it and its maintenance, and it's not cheap, by the way, right?
Not at all. And think about this, Senator, and Captain Glover too. You're going down the highway in your vehicle, and you're going 80 miles an hour in a 60. 2 years later, you're sitting at home and you get a nice envelope from the highway patrol saying, "Hey, you remember 2 years ago on December 21st of 2022, or whatever date that was from the ticket that the guy got out offshore." You're getting that, and it's all of a sudden say, "Oh yeah, here's your speeding ticket." That's not right. And I think it is I think that issue in itself, I think the enforceability issue of it, and Senator, your background in law would probably be able to talk to this a lot clearer than I could, but I think that there's a lot of legal issues there.
Well, what's offensive about it from at least the legal perspective for me, what's offensive about that is let's take your analogy a little bit farther about the highway patrol. Not only were you speeding, aka breaking the law, not only were you breaking the law, you're required to turn yourself in. You're required to report your breaking of the law to the officials that can then charge you, okay, and deprive you of your liberty. So in your highway patrol instance, you may, let's not take it as far as to say you've got a GPS, but you run over the speed limit on the interstate, and it's incumbent upon you, and the law requires you then to pick up your cell phone, call the closest highway patrolman, and say, "Hey, I just broke the speed limit. Come and write me a ticket." I mean, y'all, there's a lot of people on this podcast listening that probably would have said, "Yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to speed in the first place." That's true. But then how do you feel about having to report yourself for breaking the law? I mean, there are a couple of issues with that, namely 4th and 5th and 14th Amendment issues that I can point out. But that's a real problem. And all of a sudden it's okay because what? You're on a fishing boat rather than in your car? So for some reason, that makes it better. Your violation of privacy is better on a fishing boat than in a car.
And I have not thought about the self-reporting requirements yet, and I wasn't aware that there were that level of it, and that is insane. And hey, I'll tell you one other thing about this too that our friend Scott Cothran over at Freeman Boats pointed out. Gave the analogy of the highway patrol, and he said, "Well, even if it was in a school zone, isn't your ticket for speeding in a school zone less than it would be for speeding in a well zone?" And it is. Are they telling us the wells are more important than children?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Well, yeah, $15,000 up to $15,000 ticket, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for speeding in a well zone.
Wow.
$15,000 ticket. It's for passing a school bus with a red light, it's a $1,000 ticket. Okay, so that means a school bus is stopped, the door is open when the red light's on, right? And the school bus is stopped. The door is open and children are walking off of the bus. You pass that bus, you get a $1,000 ticket, 6 points. That's a bad ticket. But 1/15 of the size of the ticket that you get for speeding through a whale zone, where there might not even be a whale.
Yep.
Right? There might not even be a whale within 100 miles.
But in front of school, there's kids going there.
But in front of a school or a school bus, there are kids. I guarantee you there are kids on a school bus when it's stopped with the door open and the red light's going.
This right here is New Inlet Princess, our friends at Crazy Sister Marina. This is why they do not offer charters in March and April.
Yeah.
It costs them all that revenue during spring breaks and everything else because they can't get to the fishing grounds in a timely manner.
Right now, the Dolphin are showing up.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
buddy
from Charleston texted me yesterday. When was the flat day? Yesterday or the day before?
Day before.
Yeah. Whenever the flat day was, I guess that was Friday.
Yep.
They went Friday. They caught 13 Dolphin off of Charleston. The Dolphin are showing up right now. Okay? You're going to miss the first 2 weeks. If you're a big offshore fisherman, you're going to miss the first 2 weeks of the Dolphin run, which is usually, right up there in the hottest weeks of the Dolphin run. Not only that, as Gettys said earlier, they can come along at any time and just say, "Hey, there might be a whale here. We're going to close it down for the month of May now. We're going to close it down for the month of June.
June.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's up to them. So, Gettys, are the back to the conspiracy theory, which is probably more than a conspiracy theory. This is all about some green energy agenda. Are the whale guys that are pushing this? Are they just the useful idiots, and the green energy guys are the puppet masters behind the scenes? Is that how you envision this?
I don't really know the answer to that question, because I actually do feel like the well advocates are convicted by what they're speaking on.
Yeah.
And I really have a level of respect for them, because they do care about the whales. Just as I said earlier, we care about the whales as well. We just don't want to shut down our entire economy and put boaters and anglers' lives at risk. When to yours and Captain Glover's point, if you're speeding through a whale zone, you don't even know if the whales are there. And so the tracking has got to get better. But to your question, I think that there are a lot of good people in this fight on both sides of it. But I'm sure, and if it sounds conspiratorial, they write it out. This helps their clean energy initiative. And the argument to that is the Endangered Species Act, which is, by the way, it's basically like it gives the regulatory agencies this. Let's think about it like a prescription pad. Anytime that they think that something falls under their purview, or they're the doctor, and they can just write the prescription and give it to you without any sort of other oversight, per se, a lot of times. And they do this with other things than just whales.
Mm-hmm.
They do it with they do it with shorebirds. They do it with anything. But at the end of the day, I guess the legal question, and from the congressional standpoint and from the legislative standpoint, the question would be, is the Endangered Species Act put into place to help green energy, or is it even put into place to enforce speed limits? And so I think there's some questions there, even on the basis of, what does the Endangered Species Act allow these agencies, these bureaucratic agencies who answer to no one, they're unelected bureaucrats, what does it allow them to do? And so I think there are some deeper questions there of how does this play in the bigger scheme of things, where this is by far, and this is not a light statement, this is by far the largest bureaucratic overreach of the Biden administration's tenure thus far.
Yeah. I'm trying to look it up right now to see how many northern right whales supposedly exist. And the number as of April of this month, April 2024, 360.
I was going to say I knew it was in the hundreds. Yep.
Yeah. 360. In 2021, there was 350. So we've got 10 more now than there were 3 years ago, which I suppose is an improvement. The issue continually in my mind goes back to, if there are only 350, why is there not a better way to do this? Like, if there are only 350, it seems to me like, I'm thinking about waking up early in May, when everybody, you got some wind lulls in May, and everybody wakes up early, and you got that high humidity, and you wake up and you look outside and you see the trees aren't moving, and you feel that high humidity, and and you just know it's going to be a slick day, and everybody's going to be on the ocean, and you're going to see 1,000 boats out there. If this is the time of year where, I'm a whale watcher, I'm a whale guy, I'm a NOAA scientist, and I know, I got 4 or 5 days of flat weather here off the coast of South Carolina, late in the calving season, and I need to be out there. I need to be out there with strobe lights, and I need to be out there tracking these whales, and I need to be making sure that people aren't, running into them. Instead, the solution is to put speed limits on everybody, which to me means you're not going to have anybody. I mean, I think the practical effect of that is you don't have anybody running offshore until May 1st, basically. Which maybe that's a much more effective way of getting at it, Inglis. But if I was really concerned about the whales, 350 of them, and I knew that there's a handful of them off South Carolina, I think if I was a NOAA scientist, I'd be out there trying to mark them, spot them, prevent people from running over them. I've never seen that. Have you ever seen a NOAA guy offshore trying to protect a whale?
Nope. The furthest I've seen one was 15 miles, and he was on the boat with the Coast Guard, and he got on our boat and absolutely went through everything.
Well, you're talking about a guy that was checking for fishing. Which
but not that guy.
I want to get to that too, but
right.
We have to be careful too what we wish for, because you see, to Inglis's point about the guy getting in the boat with him, you see the Maine lobstermen are in a big fight at the Supreme Court now about vessel watchers and the people that actually, the observers that NOAA mandates comes on. And then what's happening, you see it's happening in the Gulf as well. These observers then have to be paid for by private business, which is a whole separate issue. But Senator Goldfinch, to your point, if this is such a big deal to them, why have they not been out there bootstrapping the effort and having people
tag every one of them
on the water?
Tag every one of them
on the water, follow them around. Follow them around.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, 350 of them. For I don't know how much it would cost our economy to stop 35+ foot boats running 6 months out of the year, but it would cost a lot. Okay, I guarantee you that the 26 or 27 boat manufacturers you represent, how many is it, Gettys? How many boat manufacturers?
28. Yeah,
28 boat manufacturers in South Carolina would be more than willing to provide watchers, satellite tags, imagery, thermal imagery. I guarantee you they'd be agreeable to providing those things as opposed to shutting down their manufacturing lines for boats over 35 foot. I guarantee you. But you know what? Nobody's talking to anybody about that. I mean, nobody's talking to the North Carolina manufacturers about that.
That's right. It's only
or the Virginia manufacturers, or the Florida manufacturers. Nobody's talking about, because I don't think they care. I don't think they care. They're not looking for real solutions. The solution is just stop them from going. And that's a ham-fisted approach to regulation, which that's what the federal government does. We take a very different approach to regulation in South Carolina. Thank goodness the General Assembly has to vote on every regulation, which, it's a double-sided sword. It comes with the effect of law because the General Assembly actually votes it as law. There's a regulatory process to it, but I mean, we in the General Assembly have to look at regulations, and we have to study them. Now, if you're doing your job as the subcommittee chairman in the regulation, you're going through it fine-tooth comb. I'm doing that right now with OCRM and DHEC regs. I'm going through it with a fine-tooth comb and saying, no, that doesn't make sense. Yes, that makes sense. They don't do that in Congress. That's not the way that works in Washington, D.C. As Gettys was saying earlier, the regulators have the power. I mean, they're the third, really the third branch of government, and a very powerful branch of government that have very little oversight and very little, really anybody to stand over their shoulder and say, hang on a minute, wait a minute, is that a good idea? Which is probably why we've seen the next topic I wanted to bring up, the ridiculous explosion in red snapper off of our coast and the entire South Atlantic fisheries management area over the course of the last 10 years, to the point where, Gettys, they are eating us out of house and home.
Yes, they are. And to your point, real quick, there is a common theme between this and the right whale issue. NOAA has put up flawed data and assumptions time after time again. Going real quick back to the right whale, they estimated in their rulemaking that only 9,300 boats would be impacted by this rule. Where the Coast Guard, our own U.S. Coast Guard, said the rule would impact 63,000 recreational boats. And so NOAA also claims that the rule will only have a $46 million impact, when that could just be the impact on one state. We're looking at a impact here, I would say, one, we're a $6.5 billion industry. So if you think of our Freemans and Scouts and others, Tidewater, those that build some of the larger boats that would be falling under this, I mean, just, the loss of charters, as Inglis already pointed out, is happening. I mean, right now, the rule would impact 63,000 vessels and put 812,000 American jobs and nearly $230 billion in economic contributions in jeopardy.
That's just recreational.
That's just recreational, or is that also?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
That's recreation.
That's just the recreational side of things. Now, I mean, now think about the commercial
That's just
side.
the East Coast, if we're thinking about it, right? And then the other thing is in the surveying that's been done nationally, the rule will force the cancellation or alteration of more than 122,000 recreational fishing trips annually. And that is a major, major driver of heads and beds on our coast. I mean, think about the tourism side of things. People aren't coming to Charleston from right in Somerville to come do a charter. These folks are traveling for Virginia, Alabama, wherever it might be. Same thing up in y'all's neck of the woods. Folks are traveling a long way to charter. They're not going to do that if they're going to spend over half their time on the vessel, or better yet, if it takes a half day charter and turns it into a full day charter or an overnight trip, right? They're not going to do it.
Yeah, so for the average 36-foot boat, which I've fished on a bunch of 36-foot boats in my life, diving and fishing, spearfishing, the average trip today, I would venture to say, is about a $1,200 cost.
Yep. That's very average, but yes.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a retail cost to a charter. I'm just talking about wholesale cost to run the boat all day long. Mm-hmm. To provide bait, to provide ice, to provide food, to provide drinks. An average cost for a 36-foot boat is $1,200. Yep. Okay, I've paid it myself many, many times having a boat about that size. And when you do that trip, how many trips did you say it would impact?
122,000 trips.
All right, do the math on 1,200 times 122,000. You're talking about gazillions of dollars. Gazillions of dollars that you're yanking right out of the economy.
That's over $145 million.
Yeah, I mean,
for those of you that are listening, that is incredible.
It's a huge amount of money that we're yanking out of the economy.
So right now, the Spanish mackerel are thick at 3 Mile. You've got weak fish, and all the charters are going to 3 Mile Reef, Paradise Reef here.
Yeah.
And typically, I would say on an estimate, running somewhere in the 22 to 32 miles an hour probably to get out there. You're talking about taking a 4 to 5 hour half-day trip and, in essence, adding almost another hour of travel time just to get to the 3 Mile Reef. Well,
and I also question whether or not, back to get us earlier points, that they can just sort of impose this new, special speed limit for a special area.
Yep.
Are they going to just be able to close special areas as well? Like, okay, we know there's a right whale within 5 miles of this area. You can't go here at all.
Right.
Like, are we going to get there? Is that the next step? Like total closure of, sort of like the way they tried to do, or they did, marine protected areas a few years ago. The entire area is closed. You can't, you can drive through there. You can drive through an MPA, but you can't bottom fish in an MPA, right? Are we going to have the same sort of theory with right whales? There's a right whale within 25 miles, 50 miles of this place. You can't go anywhere within 50 square miles of the Georgetown Hole. I mean,
I think it could happen. I don't think there's anything that's off limits for this administration.
Yeah.
When it comes to this.
Well, let me ask you this, and I wanted to move on to red snapper, but you've still got me intrigued on. You said y'all talked to Trump recently about this.
Yes. Yes.
Did you get the warm and fuzzy that this was going to get reversed immediately upon his
Oh, look,
administration?
we have it. We have it on record, on Fox, on any of the streaming devices, where he said day one he is rolling back the right well speed regulations.
Right. Well, that's good to know.
And a good segue to the snapper topic is after that, when he started talking about how crazy the speed regs were, he said, also, have y'all heard about red snapper? And he went into it, man. And he said, look, he said, I don't know that we can fix red snapper on day one, but by day 2 or 3, I'll make sure the attorneys have something drafted up to give y'all more days to fish a red snapper. So we've got some promises made by the nominee. And you know, you know this, especially at the State House. I will say the Boating and Fishing Alliance, we work with both sides very well.
Yeah.
We have a lot of good Democrats at our State House that care about boating and fishing issues as well. But on the national level, it just gets so fragmented because of the environmental aspect of it that you have to have a fighter, and that fighter is not Joe Biden. I mean, the Biden boating plan will kill us.
Yeah,
It'll kill the industry.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, you got a pretty clear choice. If fishing is your thing and boating is your thing, look, this is not a podcast to promote candidates. Like, I've never really done that.
We never have. You don't even promote yourself on here.
I don't even promote myself. Nope. But let me tell you something. If that's your thing, you got a pretty clear choice, and you're a moron if you if you do anything.
Hey, Gettys, we don't do it, but when we do it right.
I mean, you're a total moron. Yeah, look,
you're a moron if you don't.
I'll be as honest as I can be. There are a lot of things about Trump that I don't like his attitude. I don't like his bombastic attitude. I don't like the fact that, you know, he's going to have constant investigations, and that seems like a distraction. I don't like a lot of things about Trump. But y'all, good gravy. I mean, how can you do anything else based on what you know about the current Biden administration? How can you do anything else? It's just foolish to think that, you know, I'll go as far as to say our freedoms can take anything else other than moving past this administration. I mean,
one quick question for you, because you're a big state rights guy.
Yes.
How does this speed limit play in state waters? I don't understand how they can tell us what to do in state waters.
Well, ask the same question about red snapper, right? I mean, and I'm not trying to pivot. I will ask your question.
I'm with you.
I will ask your question. But, you know, the state of South Carolina imposed a red snapper season in state waters. Was that 2 or 3 years ago, Inglis?
Yes, sir.
Remember.
2 years ago. Yeah.
2 years ago. And, you know, and there's still a lot of fishermen that are confused about what that means. I mean, I get calls all the time like, hey, you've wasted your time. There are no red snapper in state waters. Well, that's not exactly true. There are some in state waters, but that's not exactly the point either, okay? The same thing should apply in the speed limit idea. Like, should the federal government be able to impose a speed limit in state waters? If they were to, so the way that this works, preemption is what this is called. Okay, if the federal government preempts a particular space in law, then they have the ability to govern it, to regulate it. I would say there is no preemption. They have to dominate a space of the law in order to preempt states' rights, okay? And I would say there is no preemption. There's no dominance in this space. There's never been a federal speed limit on the ocean, to my knowledge. I mean, there's, you know, the one that they're trying to enforce now, but there's never been any kind of dominance here. I don't know if there are even any case law in it asserting federal rights over states' rights. And so, you know, I think the answer, obviously, I'm a little bit biased, Gettys, but my answer would be I don't think they can enforce it. And now, will they? Yes. Will they assert it? Yes. If it's in place and somebody breaks the speed limit in state law or in state waters, will they write a ticket? Yes. Will it go to court, and will there be an argument made for states' rights? Yes. And if the state of South Carolina had something in place already, Gettys, we should talk about that. If the state of South Carolina has something in place already asserting some dominance in this space, there shall be no speed limit in state waters. Then,
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Right. I mean, it's exactly what we did with red snappers, what we did with black sea bass. It's probably what we ought to start thinking about doing with grouper. And again, you're going to have a lot of people out there that are just going to sort of shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, what's South Carolina doing? Like, this doesn't mean anything." Well, yeah, it does. It does. And by the way, if you look back, I've got a letter. Senator Campson's got a letter asking our congressional delegation to extend our state waters. I think the last request was 20 or 25 miles. Gettys, do you remember?
I can't remember. I think it might have been. I think it might have been 25.
Yeah. Either way, I mean, these are the kind of things that can get done. I mean, Florida's West Coast, the Gulf Coast, has asserted state jurisdiction. How far no, it was 9, and it's extended to I think it's extended to 12 now, if I'm not mistaken. But they can catch red snapper within 12 miles of their coast.
Oh, they can?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I mean, should South Carolina be able to extend its state waters? Why not?
I think we've got to get to state control. And I know this is not a podcast to promote candidates, but shamelessly, I will say
Plug them.
that Senator Goldfinch has led this fight. He and Campson both. But when you look at the most recent resolution around this idea here is Senate Bill 697 by Campson and Goldfinch that will actually bring offshore data collection into the state, and so it's putting us in a position. And I think what Senator Goldfinch was doing, and I cannot speak to his legislative intent, but I'm sure he will tell me. I think what was happening with the state limits for snapper is, and this is what I've told other folks that have said the same thing to me, Senator, is why do we have a limit on snapper if it doesn't exist? No. That's one piece to get to the final puzzle. And that's one piece to the final puzzle, being that if we're able to get our MRIP data through the state, we're able to fight for more state control.
Yeah.
We already preemptively have the snapper laws that we should on the books.
Yeah, that's right. And we should have some data. Thank you for bringing up data management as well. Like, this is something that has irked me for going on 4 or 5 years now. The first year I asked DNR politely to do it, and they ignored me. The second year I asked a little more forcefully, and they ignored me. The third year, I did it in a proviso, and they ignored me. They didn't do it. Even though it was mandated by law, temporary law, they didn't do it. And, the excuse why they didn't do it, well, they just didn't have their stuff together. And, it was even funded. They didn't have the ability to do it. Okay, this year, I'm hoping next year, Gettys, 2025, legislative year 2025, there will be a law on the books requiring them to do it, because we have to we have to show some form of data to the federal government in order to manage these species ourselves. And, we can continue this game where we try to assert further and further and further state jurisdiction, and I'm going to do that as long as I have the support from people like Gettys and his group. But we have to start data collection in order to fight these overreaches by the federal government. We have to start doing that, and DNR has to play ball. But I'm telling y'all, they don't want to play ball. They would much rather give up our states' rights and give it to the federal government, because that's less for them to do.
I am biting my tongue, but I will tell you this, that the reason for all the listeners, the reason we've got to do this is in September of 23, NOAA admitted that their MRIP data was inflated by 30 to 45%.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, but tell everybody what MRIP is, by the way.
That is the marine recreational data that comes in. It's it's not the commercial data. The commercial folks are held to another standard, where they actually have to report exactly what their catch is. And for this, the MRIP is basically the recreational fishing data that we can give. And it's just, it is literally, it's so, okay, so I just sat through a whole snapper grouper advisory panel meeting 3 weeks ago in Charleston.
You're on the advisory panel, right?
I'm now on the advisory panel, and I still have a hard time explaining what the Marine Recreational Information Program is. And so, in the deep, dark haunts of federal government and the Magnuson-Stevens Act, there is an advisory panel below the South Atlantic Fishery Council where they ask for recommendations on snapper grouper. Which, by the way, in English, this might have been my showing that I'm sort of green in the saltwater space, comparatively speaking to my freshwater experience. But I didn't realize there were over 40 species that fall under the snapper grouper.
Yeah, isn't that? Yep.
It's crazy. I had no clue.
Even some species that aren't snapper and grouper. as
Exactly.
weird as that is, right?
That's right.
But go ahead.
And you look at this, and so they bring up, let's just say we're going through, and I appreciate, I'm glad that we have input on this level, and I'm learning as I go. So this is, just learning what that process looks like. As y'all can tell today, I like to talk, so it's not cut off by 2-minute increments. When you get to the South Atlantic Fishery Council testimony, you get 2 minutes, and you can put what you want on there. And I think, last year we talked on this show, not only about the right whale stuff, but we also talked about the possible bottom fishing closures that NOAA tried to put on us when they were trying to cut off bottom fishing as a whole because of red snapper discards. But you get in a room and they give you these recommended ideas of, okay, if we take here, and I will say this, and I will say this very openly. There's a lot of take and no give in these conversations. Okay, it's not like, hey, we're going to take it here, but in 2 years, if this works, we're going to give X amount back.
Yeah, that never happens. That never happens.
In theory, do they say it's going to happen?
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Yeah, no, it does. But I also understand they have a job to do, and a lot of this, Senator, I think, is lined up by the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and I think the more that Senator Graham has learned about the Magnuson-Stevens Act and our conversations, now he's on Environmental and Public Works, he's taken a special interest in this. He actually was the one that led the letter last year with Senator Scott here and Rick Scott in Florida and Marco Rubio to say, whoa, we're not doing bottom fishing closures when your data is 35 or 40% off, and you're openly admitting that when we have a private study being done called the Great American Red Snapper Count that'll be done by 2025. And so a lot of these data questions, that's where this all comes down to, because when you have bad data, in my opinion, what happens is we're seeing it with black sea bass. The black sea bass population is decreasing, but we had so many commercial guys on this particular panel, which is all public records. You can go back and listen and say, hey, we're seeing more red snapper with black sea bass in their mouth. There is a depredation factor with red snapper where they're eating everything. Now, are they the 50-year-old, 40-year-old mature snapper like they used to be? No, but there's a ton of them. And you're seeing it with same thing with shark depredation. The federal government was so tough on sharks there for a little while as far as how you could eat them, how you consume them, and now
it's a whole
can't
other
even
problem.
have the time reel it up without a snapper or grouper being cut in half by a shark, and so.
And that's a real issue, but like that
is a real issue, and
that's an issue from Florida all the way up
Yep.
that is under appreciated by anybody that doesn't do a lot of offshore fishing. I mean, y'all, that is I don't know how to describe how big of a deal that it's become in the last 4 or 5 years, where it is virtually impossible to go a day without losing, I don't know, a third of your catch to sharks. I mean, in some cases, it's as much as half of your entire daily catch to sharks.
We lost over half our. But when Stephen and I went offshore,
Yeah.
2 months ago, we
Half.
I mean, we lost half. We lost $200 worth of weights and everything else from the sharks.
Yeah, I mean, it has gotten that bad, and I know there's some efforts out there to try to promote eating shark again, and I don't know how successful that'll be, but I mean, something needs to be done about the sharks. And everybody nowadays, a shark's endangered. If you don't spend any time out in the ocean, everybody thinks a shark's endangered. Everybody's shark finning. The dang Chinese are eating shark fin soup everywhere.
I wish.
First of all, I've never seen a Chinese fishing vessel in our waters.
Nope.
Okay, thankfully, I've never seen one. But if they were invited into our waters to shark fish for a few weeks, I'd be more than happy for them. It's out of control. It is out of control. Sorry, I interrupted you.
You didn't interrupt, but it was a great point. But the other thing I was going to bring up on these MRIPs and everything else is the people they're surveying. And who are they surveying? I don't know. Is it a random thing where they call? I do know, we get, surveyed at the landing periodically by DNR's surveyors. Do those numbers go to MRIP, or is that just for the state? I know when I was a charter captain, I would get that phone call once a month from them, wanting to know my catches and everything else, above and beyond the reports that I had to fill out for the state with my commercial, my charter permit. But, I just don't think they're surveying the right people at all. I mean,
I've been surveyed once in the last decade. Once. At South Island.
I would love to hear Stephen's response.
No, so this young lady, I'd love to tell you the story. This young lady, we were spearfishing, okay? It was me and Kent. And this young lady came up obviously came off of Yawkey, was at South Island, and came up and asked if she could see our fish, which anyway, why do you need to see our fish? I mean, you don't have a badge and you don't have a gun. Why do you need to see my fish? Well, we're doing surveys. Okay, well, let's see how this goes. Sure, why not? So first fish she pulled out, she had no idea what it was. Okay, it was and to her credit, it was a mottled grouper. Okay, which you don't see. They're deep water species. You don't see them very often, but we see them sometimes, like out on the break when we're spearfishing, and they're great to eat. And so I had a mottled grouper. She had no idea what it was. First thing she did was call on her phone for 4 or 5 DNR guys to come and take a look at it. Okay, let's look in these guys' cooler and see what all they have now that I have identified a fish that I can't identify. I've seen a fish that I can identify. And then went through the rest of the cooler, hogfish, scamp, gag, whatever it was, And by far, she said, the most interesting bag of fish that she had ever seen as a biologist. And I said, oh, you're a fish biologist. Yep. I said, how many big hog snapper like this do you ever get to see? None. Okay. She said, that's the biggest scamp I've ever seen. That's the biggest scamp you've ever seen? It was maybe 18 pounds. Yeah, well, that's the biggest scamp I've ever seen. So she's never seen a mottled grouper. She's seen no hogfish. She knew they existed. She didn't even know the mottled grouper existed. She's seen no hogfish, and an 18-pound scamp was the biggest scamp she's ever seen. This is the biologist that they're using to, quote-unquote biologist. I doubt she's I'm sure she doesn't have a PhD or a master's degree. But this is the person that they were using to do sampling. How many of those samples do you think are actually correct? I'm guessing very few. Very few. Anyway, go ahead.
All I knew to go ahead.
And when they go out and collect the data themselves, when this bottom fishing idea came about last year, they pointed out where they were going to collect the data, and there were questions about, were they going to hard bottom? Were they going to places where the fish actually were? And so the whole data situation, and here's again, I think the National Marine Fisheries Service does what they're prescribed to do, again, by law, with the Magnuson-Stevens Act. I mean, the Magnuson-Stevens Act isn't as quite as bad as the Endangered Species Act, because I think there are some good things in the Magnuson-Stevens Act. But
But
we're looking at
are they going out to deserts and fishing with the wrong bait? I mean,
that's right.
Right.
That's
I mean,
right.
there's nothing in the Magnuson-Stevens, and I've read it. I mean, there's nothing in it that I've seen that requires them to go to a place where that species actually exists and to fish with bait that fish actually likes to eat. I mean, if you're looking for a red snapper, what do? Right? Like you said, at Gettys, you go to hard bottom or, better a ledge or a wreck, but you go to some form of hard bottom and you feed them squid on the bottom. You know, if you go out to a sand desert and you drop, I don't know, something other than squid, very unlikely that you're going to catch a red snapper. And that might be, unfortunately, what some of these people are hoping for. I mean, I hate to think the worst of the environmentalist greenies. I mean, I really do. I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I also like to think that there's quite a few of them that would love to come back with 0 red snapper as a sample when they go offshore. And I could turn them 3 miles one way or 2 miles the other way with a different set of bait and change their whole trajectory.
Yep.
You know, their entire life changes in a matter of minutes if they would just allow somebody that actually knows how to help them sample. Or let me show you a video. English, did you see the video that I sent from, when was that, last week?
No.
You got the video?
Well, I've got the video. Yeah, but I've got the video, but no, where you want me to send it?
You don't need to send it anywhere. My point was, like, we were spearfishing and we were picking up megalodon teeth on this one particular ledge. And I don't know if I had my video camera positioned correctly or not, but I know that I was like swimming through giant schools of 20, 25-pound red snapper.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Like,
I mean, it really didn't look much different than the last video you did. The last time you went bottom.
no, I mean, I would guess a school, broken up into 4 or 5 different schools, but a school of 300 to 400 mature red snapper. And when I say mature, over 20 pounds red snapper, some of them in the 30-pound range on this one piece of bottom the size of a football field. I mean, 400 red snapper. And not another shootable fish on that one particular bottom. And I'm sure it's because of the overabundance of red snapper. Not one black sea bass. I didn't see one shootable gag or one shootable scamp on that piece of bottom. I didn't see one hogfish on that piece of bottom. Because there's nothing for them to eat there.
Nope. Here, another fishery that is this year, I mean, let's see. We open up May 1st, close June 14th for gag grouper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are the gags at? I wonder if they're hiding because they're scared to death of the red snapper. I mean, have they moved? Have they?
Yeah, or they're moving out. I mean, even the red snapper are moving out into extremely deep water now. I mean, we caught a pretty dang good one in almost 300 feet of water last year. And, I mean, that's probably where the big gags are going, if I had to guess, is pushing out farther and farther. And in the wintertime, they traditionally push inshore. In the summertime, they push offshore. But you got the red snapper doing the same thing now in cold water months. They're pushing inshore farther and farther. We had one caught at the 3 Mile last year, English.
Yep.
Had one caught at the Jetty last year.
Jetty, yeah.
Had one caught at the CJ last year. Had one caught at the Georgetown Jetty last year. So, I mean, they're pushing farther and farther inshore and creating more and more problems for us.
And I think the important thing to note here, too, for all the listeners, and I know they listen to you in English all the time, we are all for sustainable and responsible fishing, because when you look at it from the industry side of things, if we don't have good waterways, I mean, that's our golden goose. And you cannot kill that, because that's the egg. And, I think that's the same thing with some of the clean water discussions that happen. Of course we're for clean water. Of course we're for protecting the right well. Of course, we're for all this because it's good for our industry. It's good for our environment. And what's good for our environment is good for our industry. But what we're talking about here is the data so far off that when you think about the traditional sort of commercial versus recreational mindset when it comes to these regional fishery management councils, this is users versus non-users now. And I'm looping recreational and commercial folks together in the using groups, and the non-users being the scientists that are telling us what, especially with the commercial guys, how often they go out, whether it's a headboat charter or whatever that might be. It's so clear. I mean, and it can't get more clear than having a video of it on the bottom like you have. I've seen some of your videos before, and
you shared our one video. I meant to bring that up a minute ago, but yeah, you did share that video.
Yes, and we got to come up with some sort of effort where we continue to talk with our congressional delegation, get this Senate Bill 697 passed. It's in the House Resolutions Committee. I think it will pass this year. But we've got to continue to stand up for states' rights because the federal government is doing us no certain. It's all a disservice in the way that we are treated at the end of the day. And there's you're only one voice, and so it's kind of like screaming in the ocean.
Is there anything more accurate than video? That's my next question. That's my biggest question in all of this. And Stephen, I know, made offers.
Sonar.
hey, you and I are we're gonna discuss that, Mr. Bass Fisherman. We're gonna discuss that too. But I don't think there's anything more admissible in a survey or an account than to put a video out there, have 10 biologists sit down in a chair, play the video, and let them sit there and count.
And I would even, if
Stephen has offered,
if it would actually move the needle, I'd even share like GPS coordinates and dates and times and what I was doing. And I mean, I'd be happy to go from the north end of, let's just say, my territory, quote unquote, my territory, to the middle, to the south end, to the east end, to the west end, which is a big giant swath of ocean, and share GPS coordinates and take videos and 4, 5, 6 dives a day and just show videos. And I mean, I could do this. It's not that difficult. The issue is they could do this. It's not that difficult. Like, they could do this.
They don't want to.
But
it proves too much.
But my concern is they don't want to. Yeah.
Do you think, Senator, that, and maybe this is more of a conversation to be had in the Gressett building, do you think there's a way that we could work with Coastal Carolina or the University of South Carolina and have some sort of private study like they're trying to already do with the Great Red Snapper count, but have it be more state oriented and just in South Carolina and just outside of South Carolina state waters, where we have a better understanding of what that MRIP data will show when we start getting it accurate? But because, to your point, I've dealt with some of the marine biologists at Coastal, and there's some great folks over there that are common sense scientists, and they're going to, to Inglis's point, can we not just have a bunch of biologists sit around and count? I think there's got to be something that could come from this conversation of how do we utilize some of the resources we have through the state, that even if our great natural resources department doesn't want to do it, we could at least start having some sort of fodder, some sort of idea of what exists.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. My irritation with this entire conversation is that why isn't DNR and the federal government, why are they already doing it? Like, why do we have to do this for? But I don't want to be the complainer. I want to be one to offer solutions. So the answer is yes. I'd be happy, and I'm sure Campson would be happy. I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he would be happy to support some funding to do exactly that. And but you know what? I'm not comfortable anymore with giving a blank check to an educational institute to go and tell me what my fishing rights are. So I'm a little bit, it makes me a little bit nervous about giving a blank check to an educational institute unless I know exactly what they're doing or they're on the boat with me, because I just
Could
don't.
you have a peer review panel or some sort of mixture of public private
Yeah, maybe.
that could line up some parameters around it?
Or, I mean, the truth is the way that this is dealt with from my, like the way that I do this sort of thing sometimes, that I just require that I be involved. And that seems silly for, a state senator to have to be involved, but I just don't trust people to tell me what mine and my constituents' fishing rights are anymore. And I mean, I need you to prove it to me. DNR and I have had a lot of fights over the years because, honestly, their data's bad. Their data is bad. And I can give you example after example after example. And I'm not suggesting that the flounder data, no, I'm not suggesting that the flounder changes were incorrect. But the flounder data was wrong. 80%, CCA says that 80% of our flounder catch comes from Horry, Georgetown County. You know how many sampling sites DNR had for flounder in Horry, Georgetown County? 0.
Wow.
Wow.
0. And you know what? They required of everybody to take cuts on flounder. And so, again, I'm not saying that the change was bad. I think, we've got more flounder now than we did 5 years ago for sure. And I think they're getting bigger every year. So, I think they may have thrown a dart in the dark and won anyway. But there was no data, 0 sampling sites north of Georgetown. 0 sampling sites. And they based all of those regulatory changes for flounder based on faulty data. Y'all, that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And so I'm in the same boat. I know I've flipped to flounder, but I used it as an analogy, Gettys. I'm uncomfortable with CCA or CCU or USC running a boat out into 80 feet of sand and fishing with cigar minnows and hoping that they can come back and tell us that the red snapper just aren't as thick as we think they are. If there's a way for me to be involved and to ensure that this is done in a proper way, then sure, yeah, absolutely, 100% want that data, want to provide that data to DNR. Maybe that data could become part of our data management sampling system that we need in order to provide to the federal government. I think that's a great idea, but there's got to be a way to provide some accountability. Otherwise, we're going to be right back where we are.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Hey, I know we have had you for over an hour.
Yep.
We probably ought to.
No, don't let him go yet.
Okay.
You got a second? You got time to talk about it?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, let's do it.
What do you want to talk about?
real
Forward-facing sonar?
Real quick, let's talk. Let everybody know that your past with bass, because I kind of had not. It didn't. I knew you fished for the Gamecocks, but
Yes, sir.
I forgot you spent your little time up there hanging out with our buddies at BASS. What was your position over there?
Yes, so I was fortunate enough to win the College Fishing National Championship in 2015, and after that I was in public relations and journalism and was able to go on the road with Bassmaster for quite a few years. Started out handing out Bass Track phones in the morning, which is basically the tracking device that would go in the boats to let the cameras know who's doing well, let the audience know who's doing well, and so started just doing that at the last couple of years of college. Worked my way up and did photography and writing for the magazine and also for the website, and then by the end of my time there, I was actually doing their media relations. So I would basically explain to local news stations, and one time we had the New York Times come in and do an article, but just explain to external media what the boating and fishing world's about, and in this case, largemouth bass fishing. But through that time, still very active in tournament fishing, and haven't been as active as I used to be now that we got the Boating and Fishing Alliance up and going. But yeah,
Who was your
those
partner?
little green fish have been good to me.
Were you with my boy P. Walters?
Yes, I was.
I thought so.
Patrick's done an incredible job. He's
Yes.
yeah, he's down fishing the St. Johns River right now, and the Lake Murray Elite Series tournament comes up in a couple of weeks. I think that'll be a fun tournament to watch. And Patrick has done a hell of a job catching him. I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with. And so yeah, tournament fishing's changing though, and it is. There are technological advances that are coming that no one really planned for, and so right now you're seeing 18, 19-year-olds that are coming in that are video game fishing the entire tournament, and it's an incredible thing to see.
It is, and you and I sent you and the senator some stuff about LiveScope that I've been blessed to have it in the boat for a year this week, and I'll tell you that in the saltwater world, I am loving using it to eliminate dead areas, and I say that in a sense like in tournament bass fishing. I mean, these guys are fishing for their livelihoods. Okay, it's legal, it's out there. And why would they not use it? Now, having 5 and 6 and 7 transducers on a boat is a joke, but I'll say this much. If you're in it to win it, and a tool like forward-facing sonar, whether it's Garmin, Lowrance, whatever you want to say, I mean, we're not sponsored by anybody, but I will put LiveScope up against any of them. But, it makes a big difference. I have really, really, really figured out in the saltwater how to use it, where to use it. It's made a big difference. I'm able to, right now I've got video that I need to send the two of y'all of a school of black drum, and I was hooked up to one of them. And we're talking a dinosaur. They're right now, they're at 3 Mile. I'm assuming they're spawning, but it's schools of 40 to 50 plus inch, and then maybe even bigger, black drum. And I'll tell you that there's been 2 people that have been hooked up to them and lost them, but they're weird. They're moving around. They look like they're a school of Manhattan. They're so close. But then when you start looking at them on that forward-facing sonar, you see the fish individually. And because of the size of the squares and the graphs in my boat, I know that each one is 2 foot long. And I see how big the fish is going from one square to the other, and it's amazing. But I'm using it at the Gettys. I'm using it in the inlet. I'm finding flounder with it. It's making a big difference. In the world of bass fishing, and JT Tompkins is a good friend of mine. We had him on last week on our radio show, and we've talked a lot about it. Going back to Patrick Walters 3 years ago,
Patrick's good with it.
After he won at Lake Fork, he had been getting it tuned in, and then of course
he was one of the pioneers of forward-facing sonar.
Thank you. And this is where I tried to go with this a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Oh no, Patrick didn't figure it out. He was against it." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "When he got that century belt, I'll promise you, he will tell you."
I can remember having a conversation with Patrick when he got back and called him that way, and I said, "Listen, man." I said, if they were ready to outlaw Alabama rig because of the competitive advantages an Alabama rig could give you in bass fishing, I said, might not happen this year. It might not happen the next, but all these people start using forward-facing sonar. There is going to be controversy.
Yep.
And it certainly happened.
And listen, talking about a golf ball. I mean, so was it, who was it? Bill? No, it was Hank Parker. Put that video out with finally came out and said his thoughts on it. I will say this much, Lowrance, Garmin, Simrad, Humminbird, blah, blah, blah. They mean so much to bass fishing. The business side of it. They do mean a lot to it. But yes, they came up with, this technology came out there, but this technology may be hurting the sport. And I say that in a sense. You get the spectators like myself. I mean, listen, trust me, I'm sitting here watching Corey Johnston right now, believe it or not. I'm watching Corey Johnston jack them down there in the James River. But it's crazy that people are complaining about watching somebody's head looking down at the screen, and they're not getting to watch them cast at that stump or cast at that dock, and sight fishing for them on the bed. But it is a true advantage. I fought it. I fought, openly saying it, but it is a true advantage for the fishermen and a disadvantage for the fish. I think that whole 90% of the fish are in 10% of the water, that most of us thought, and that's how it was. This has just totally blown that out the water. Don't you
Oh yeah,
agree?
I agree 100%. And I also agree that there are competitive advantages there. And I think Hank hit it best on the head about high school fishing, how it's not going to be good for that because the barrier to entry is now, going to be thousands and thousands of dollars more. But I also think, so here's my thing with it, and it might not be a popular opinion, but this is my opinion on it from being a competitive fisherman to
Yep.
watching competitive fishing is in golf, there are limits on range finders. There's limits on the type of golf clubs you can use. In basketball, once you make it to the NBA, the 3-point line's further behind. In football, the goalposts are skinnier. In NASCAR, there's governors on certain types of things that you can and can't use. In baseball, you can only use aluminum bats until you make it to the minor leagues. I don't think regulation, as much as we've talked today about how regulation is bad, I don't think regulation in technology is terrible when it comes to professional sports.
Yep.
And they've let the cat out of the bag. They're not going to be able to just ban it altogether, but there's got to be ways that they could figure out one day you can use it, one day you can't, or maybe certain tournaments you can use it, or maybe this is just where you draw the line in the sand because there's great companies like Humminbird, Lowrance, Garmin, others. They're going to keep advancing the technology. And I have a serious concern for the livelihood of the fish.
Yep.
When you look at how you can pick out the brood stock now, you're catching larger fish. You're catching fish that hadn't been caught before a lot of times as well.
Yep.
These are fish that were once uncatchable. And you're going out there and you're taking some of the larger fish out of the water. I think the case study for this already has been shown with crappie fishing. I think they're looking at crappie fishing for more of a, they're going to go ahead and start putting some sort of regulatory parameters around it. But
Yeah.
when you look at this, to me, this level of technology, there's got to be a cutoff, and there's got to be a time that you say, well, is this taking some of the sport out of it? And to me, I don't know how you look at it and say this does not take a lot of the sport out of fishing.
No.
And to me, there's not a perfect answer for it yet. I don't think anybody's come up with the right answer yet. But it's the most controversial topic that's ever been in bass fishing.
It is, and I'll tell you what, the to watch it, there was a period there, I would say in the last 2 months, where it was just so, at the front of all the bass fishing talk, everything. And I watched so many different videos, so many different podcasts about it. Todd Castledine is really good if anybody follows him. Mm-hmm. My partner, Andrew Upshaw, and I don't know if you know Andrew. Andrew won the college also a little bit before you. But Andrew and I work on his show, Let's Fish TV. And Andrew is another one that has, made his voice known about it. And, I really think it's something where you make it available, maybe even for pre-fishing. Use it for pre-fishing to do everything, and then it cannot be turned on during competition. Or like you said, you do some tournaments that are, FFS friendly, and then some that aren't. But yes, you mentioned the Alabama rig, and that is just true testament to there is the ability for bass to say, hey, this is too much,
And there's that also, though. Let me say this on the flip side of the Alabama rig argument. The one thing the Alabama rig also showed us is if you go out and you throw the Alabama rig today or in the last couple months when it was probably good, the fish don't eat it like they once did. So that whole mindset of fish adapting is probably true with forward-facing sonar as well. They'll adapt to that. But I tell you what's gonna really not be good for the tackle manufacturers is all of a sudden you're not throwing a deep diving crankbait. You're not throwing jigs. You're throwing a jerk bait and you're throwing a small swim bait.
Yep.
And I think that these forward facing sonar baits is going to severely limit the tackle manufacturers.
Yep.
And that's just a purely speculation, purely opinion on my part. I've not
No.
talked with any of our tackle manufacturers that make me feel like they're sincerely worried about it. But from the market standpoint, I think that you got to look at that too.
Yeah, you look at at some of these baits now, they're having to change the design, and I might be. Listen, you know the bass fishing side of it. I don't know much of it, but I do know they're changing these baits up because they need something that shows up better on live scope for them. So they're putting the lead more inside of the bait on different things. They're changing, small details to the baits so that they're more forward-facing sonar friendly, and they get a better response from the unit. In other words, I say response, but they're getting a better picture of that bait in the water so that they can see it. And then you got crappie fishing, which, man, you got companies that are building rods, and they're called live scope rods or scoping rods, or they're coming out with a whole new line of rods just for that. And you take crappie fishermen who once fished with 12 to 16 rods on the boat, and they're going to 2 rods because they're live scoping. They're casting at the fish.
Andy Morgan, a great bass fisherman. He's a legend.
Yes, he is.
Sport. He is on record last week saying, "If you ain't scoping, you're hoping."
You're hoping. That's right. And I'll tell you this, that saying, we use that saying in September of I was introduced to live scope September of 2022. I was at Santee with a bunch of great crappie fishermen for a crappie summit, and we were put on boats to cover these fishermen and talk about the products and different things. And my partner sat down in the chair. He threw a 1/32 ounce jig 50 feet from the boat to a brush pile that we watched that jig sink, and we watched a half-pound crappie swim out of there and hit his bait, and he set the hook. That to me, as soon as I saw it, I said, I'm coming back and I'm calling marshals, and we're going to work out getting that live scope on my boat, because this thing will make a difference in saltwater. And it has. I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. And I'm going to go on the defensive for it. I've got people now that are looking to mount it on their boats. They're looking to put it on their boats. They don't want to do trolling motor, which is great for bass guys. But for us, we do so many different fishing styles where we anchor up with our, spot lock, and we fish, either to the port or starboard side or behind us or whatever. You want to have that ability to manually turn that transducer. So, these guys are using it. But I've got the weekend fisherman or the every 3-week fisherman that's saying, do you really think it'll help me? And I'm like, yes. I said, I'm only going to be honest.
Especially if you don't get to spend the time out there.
Yeah.
I mean, that cuts down the time of catching them. And so to your point, I think the recreational side of it, fine.
It's not going anywhere.
I don't know if it has a place in professional fishing, because at this point you might as well have the senator down there with a video camera showing us where all the schools of bass are, like he can with the snapper.
That's right. Hey, listen, I've heard Freeman is now offering it. Freeman is offering it I know it's an option at Key West now, but Freeman's offering it as an option along with Omni, right? Aren't they doing Omni too?
Yeah,
they're offering options. So
yeah, they're putting Omnis on them, but I mean they're $100,000 or so.
Oh wow!
But it's the same science. It truly is the same science. As the technology, same technology.
But I mean, you're talking about being able to find a billfish 500 yards in front of you.
I can find a fish with my unit that I've got up to 400 feet away from the boat. I mean, that's not quite 300 yards, however far, but 400 feet. I've got the XR, and I can find it, that far. Now, does it look really clear? Can I tell what it is? No. But you get a black drum, and you get a weak fish, and you put a shark in under my boat, and inside of 50 feet minimum, I can tell you what it is, and it's crazy because it just draws it out so good. But again, I can't wait to go, for the summer to get here for Manhattan, looking for bait. And I drop that thing down and, there's no Manhattan busting the top of the water. And I go right over and I realize that they're 10 feet down, 20 feet from the boat. And I pull up, throw the net, load up and go. And everybody else is out there waiting to watch a flip. They're waiting to see a bait flip. I'm like, we're done. We're gone. It's freaking awesome. But I do see that bass is, they're in a tough spot. They've got to come up with something.
They put a study committee together with Davey Height, who's on it. Good old South Carolina guy.
I like Davey a lot.
Know.
Yep.
Yeah, Davey's a great guy, and he's on there, and then some others. So I think that the study committee will probably have some findings at the end of the year on what they're going to do. Or I don't know what they're calling it, their technology committee, whatever they're calling it. But it is they know that I think Bass does know that studying the issue is something that they need to do.
Well, I know I know we brought you on here to talk SCBFA, but I do want to ask you one last question.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen any of the stories about this young man who was disqualified and failed the polygraph for that bass tournament?
Which one was it?
A young guy named Tyler. Happened last summer. And
you talking about in Alabama?
I'm talking about in Alabama. Yes, sir. Have you seen it?
I saw a Facebook post on it. I haven't read much into it yet, just because it was Alabama.
Well, we won't talk about it on air then. Well, here's my deal. Okay. Immediately, I saw a very large figure, a very large name who is on TikTok, really big into bass fishing social media world, Slick Johnson, put a post out talking about this young man. I'd never heard of the story, never heard of the young man. I heard it, and immediately I almost thought about going and putting a post and sharing it. Here's a guy cheating, blah, 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 blah. Well, said young man comes back with a video last week, and I got to watch it. And he brought up some great points, and he's taken 2 other polygraphs and passed them, and he's offered to take other polygraphs and to reset up. And there's just a whole bunch to the story of this church that put this golf tournament and this fishing tournament on. There's a whole lot that doesn't make sense. And I think my question I was going to ask you is how much faith do you put in a polygraph? Senator, you're right there. I want to hear your opinion on this. How much faith do you put in a polygraph when the fact that this young man's bass fishing career, and I'm not saying he's innocent, I'm just asking, how much faith can you put in a polygraph that's inadmissible in court to the fact that it could have ruined this young man's career? And I'm just going to say that I feel terrible for him if he was innocent. I feel terrible for him because I watched his video. But how much faith can you put in these?
You want my opinion of that?
Yeah, I do. And I almost sent you this because he's looking for a lawyer, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, you can train yourself to beat it.
Right.
You can be trained to beat it. But I do think it's a pretty good indicator if you are accused of cheating and you offer yourself up for a polygraph immediately. I think it's a pretty good indicator that that person feels pretty confident about their position.
Right.
Right? And that's why a lot of tournaments will put in the rules that you are subject to be polygraphed. If you come up a year later and say, I'll be polygraphed now, I'm sort of curious why didn't we talk about polygraphing the minute that he was accused of cheating?
Well, apparently right after he did try to get he worked with the Alabama Board of Polygraphers. Is that how am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Of polygraphers.
Yeah.
And he tried to line up and tried to get more information on his polygrapher because apparently there is some qualifications and whatever.
There are.
Yeah.
And they were not they did not work with him, and he finally did get through to them and got in touch with their board, and they made a finding and didn't say whether they found anything against this certain polygrapher, but they did say that we hope that because of your bringing this to our attention, that this does not happen to anyone ever again, and blah, 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 this and that. Basically never said whether they were right or wrong, just said that thank you so much.
Oh, so his accusation was that the polygrapher was tainted in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
And or the equipment tainted, or the program. But with that being said, I truly believe, I took the polygraph for I had to take one this summer, and I was nervous going into it. I'm like, what if I screw up? Like, we didn't cheat. I know we didn't cheat, but what if for some reason that I screw up and we fail it? That cost us $30,000 and everything else. And I passed it with flying colors. But I did talk to the polygrapher, and he told me some things that typically people can do to get a. It's not that you fail it. It's called inconclusive.
Yeah,
that's right.
And once you get an inconclusive, they can't disqualify you.
That's right.
But anyway, I really didn't know if you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Inglis,
Yep.
on this particular subject, there's some homework for those of you that want to learn more about the polygraphs and how they work in fishing. There is a podcast that Trait and Chris Aldane, it's called The Bilge, where they interviewed, it's like 2 hours long almost, where they interviewed the head polygrapher.
That is one of the best podcasts.
That used to be for Major League Fishing. And if you go listen, it talks about how you can't technically fail a polygraph. It's either inconclusive or conclusive. And when it gets into, I had no clue the qualifications these people should have before they call themselves. I mean, like they were talking about, you fish a Friday night derby or a weekend warrior type tournament where they do the polygraph in the front of the car, and they, or they put you in a hotel room that's got a bunch of stuff going on or whatever it might be.
Or in a trailer, or stick you in a trailer. Yep,
that's right. And you'll learn from this particular podcast and the guy that they interview. Like, there are so many things with the environment that you're surrounded upon while you're doing the polygraph that matter, and it goes into how is this in tournament fishing? And there are, like, if you have somebody that comes back inconclusive, 6 or 7 times, likely if they're deceiving you, you're going to figure it out.
Yep.
And so, and it actually talks about some inaction that the polygrapher recommended that Major League Fishing did not take. It is a loaded episode, but that kind of sums up my feelings on it. It's a lot deeper than just passing or failing.
I think it is too, and I agree with you. And that is I'm saying it's the Bilge, right? That's the name of theirs. Yeah, they're awesome. They do a great job, and that I listened to that on my trip to Florida to go peacock bass fishing. I listened to that podcast my last hour and a half of the trip, and I was just amazed. And that guy, I mean, he sounded completely qualified to be talking about it with all of his legal experience with the, with the police that he had worked for, the law enforcement company or police station or police department that he worked with and everything else. But, I real quick, I'll let you go. There's a lot of talk that Jacob Wheeler's failed quite a few polygraphs and that they have remained private in the world of MLF. Have you heard that as well?
I don't know what's going on at MLF, and I hadn't heard anything or anything.
I'm not a big MLF fan.
Well, you going back to when I worked with Bass, that was during that time that everything was happening. So that could be a whole nother story. But that particular angler, I'm sure, can defend, what he's seen and or what's happened with him. I'd prefer not to comment on that directly.
Yep, that's smart.
This
Me too.
Industry so small with the bass fishing side of things. I think Jacob Wheeler he's awesome. By far the best angler on the planet right now.
Yes, sir.
And I think there's going to be certain things that might pop up that definitely puts a target on his back. And
those would be the ones. Those would be the ones that you would expect to see with the target. Those are going to be the ones that are going to get that target on them. And I just thought it was crazy that they were. Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like and the reason I say that is because it sounds like a bunch of jealous fishermen that are getting their butts kicked. And and the same story could be said about this young man, because apparently he was winning a lot of tournaments, had won 18 tournaments with 18 different partners.
Hey, and neither one of these guys have ever brought fish to the scales with lead weights in their stomach formed to the shape of their stomach like the walleye guys do.
Yeah, we talked about that one. That was a good one.
It's it's the polygraphs aren't black and white, and I think that there are great anglers out there that certainly have a target on their back. Now, are there times that they've stretched the rules over their career? Yeah, I'm sure there are, but that's probably happened more times than not. Overall, I would say fishing's a sport of integrity. Yep. I think having marshals in the boat, having the referees or the umpires in the major league boats helps. I mean, so it would be hard to do something really wrong.
I think so. I think so too, completely. I think the Thursday night and the Friday night, 3-hour shootout, that's a different story. But I do believe when you talk about something on that platform, and it sounded to me like the only, there was no, obviously, fish basket or anything like that. It was intel thing. It sounded like it was just information. Someone, getting information from outside of that, I guess, with Bassmaster. I talked to JT about it a couple weeks ago. They can talk amongst each other all they want to. Like, I mean, Chris Zaldain can pick the phone up and call JT and say, hey, get over here, I'm catching fish. But
the information rule is hard to interpret. It's even harder to be admissible on polygraph, because if you pull up, my thing was when I was fishing tournaments that had off limits, you could pull up to a gas station, somebody see in a rat boat, and they won't come over there and tell you, hey, I caught him on this side. I caught him over here. Yep. Yeah. If you say, hey man, look, I can't take in any information, does that, at the end of the day, if you take a polygraph, does that trigger something in your mind to say, hey, I might have taken information on accident? So, yep. I mean, there's a lot of things in tournament fishing that are certainly issues that don't have a black or white answer.
No. Well, we've already we've put the senator to sleep over here. When it comes to bass fishing,
we're gonna get him bass fishing this summer. I'm gonna take him. Me and Davey Height need to get him out on the water this summer.
Well, if you go fishing with Davey Height, I'm coming. I'll bring the camera, even if I don't get to fish. But please. I'd love to go with you two.
Fishing with us too. But I know you know how to bass fish, and I'm not saying the senator doesn't. But
well, I'll tell you what.
We got to educate. The freshwater guys got to educate our good saltwater friends in the legislature too, because those little green fish mean a lot to our economy.
We got to teach him that fresh water is for more than just drinking. That's for sure.
I'll show you. I'll show y'all how to put the grouper snatch on a largemouth bass.
You set it up for Lake Murray, and I'll go hop on the boat with Blanchette, and then you guys can go, and we'll do it together and get Chris out there.
Let's do it. Guys, I certainly enjoyed it.
Hey, Gettys, it was awesome hanging out with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And any last words there, Senator?
Thank you. No, I'm good to go. Appreciate your time.
All right, buddy.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you for everybody that made it with us thus far, and look forward to giving updates in the future. And, hey, just reach out to your congressman or your senator and let them know, and U.S. senator, let them know that you are against the right whale speed limit regulation. It is in the Office of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs right below the White House right now, so we expect a rule to come out in the next couple months, and we need all of the pushback we can get and slow down this process and ask the administration to withdraw the rule.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Gettys. Appreciate all you do, buddy. All right, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye.
All right, great one, buddy. I'm glad we got that knocked out, and we're going to get out of here. Hey, y'all, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and follow us at TrilogyOutdoorsMedia.com. We'll have another podcast coming out next week, but make sure you listen to Gettys. I hope you picked up a bunch of stuff right there. And, again, stay in touch with your legislators. Let them know what your thoughts are on this. And we'll be back next week talking fins, fur, and feathers here on Trilogy Outdoors Podcast. Hey, y'all, Captain E here with Southern Anglers Radio Show, and I'll tell you what, I am super excited to be down in the Pond Road Storage in Murrells Inlet. I'm located within moments of either going to the river or going to put in the inlet. I'm keeping that Key West 250 Bay Reef indoors, and it is staying in great shape. I only have to wash the boat once now, and that's when I put it up and not before I take it to go fishing. but you can get incredible options here. 20-foot wide, 50-foot deep with 14-foot roll-up doors, a most state-of-the-art security system to keep you that peace of mind on all your products that you may keep in these storage buildings. You've got climate-controlled or non-climate controlled outdoor storage for trailers, RVs, and such. You can't go wrong. 843-855-7375. Give Chris Collins a good call down there. We can't wait. We love broadcasting down here inside the storage building, and you need to come down here and check it out too. Come down. Palm Road Storage, right here in Merle's Inlet.
Trilogy Outdoors Podcast is a product of Trilogy Outdoors Media. All views and opinions of our hosts and guests are not necessarily those of our sponsors. Trilogy Outdoors is produced and edited by Trilogy Outdoors Media. Be sure to follow us on all the podcast platforms as well as our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also don't forget our other brands, Southern English Radio Show and Walk 'Em All Outdoor Magazine. To find more information, visit TrilogyOutdoorsMedia.com. And remember, if it's anything dealing with fins, fur, and feathers, you're going to find it right here on Trilogy Outdoors.